You're listening to the Truth Podcast from PursueGOD.org.
All right, so Vic, this interview is going to go on our Pursue God Video YouTube channel. It's going to go on our Truth Podcast and also on our Men's Podcast, because I think what you have to say in your story and through some of the resources you have out there is really helpful for men. So first of all, let's start with an introduction. Vic, you're a personal friend of mine. You're a longtime supporter of Pursue God. So grateful for you in those ways. You're also an amazing entrepreneur, and now you're an author. So, man, you've got it all, don't you? So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us real quick, tell us your story and your website, theredeemedsecondhalf.com.
Tell you my story. You know, by the time you get to 65, the story gets pretty long. So I'll have to try and abridge it somehow. You see, I started out in New Jersey. I was very smart, or so I was told. But I dropped out of college twice, didn't know what I was going to do. I was a fry cook at Bennigan's. And then I ended up just randomly joining the Navy, which got me out of New Jersey. And I will be forever thankful to the Navy for getting me out of New Jersey. And so I moved to San Diego, lived there for a while, got married, was married for 24 years, and then had a divorce. After that, I moved to, I lived in Utah for 18 years. And then after my divorce, I moved to Puerto Rico for a year and a half, and then to Nashville. And now I live in Franklin. I built and sold two entertainment websites. One is Screen Rant, about movie and TV news. The other is Game Rant, about video games. And I'm essentially retired. And last December, I started up a Substack called The Redeemed Second Half, which is to speak to older men who maybe have been through divorce or some other midlife issue, and they need to know that there is life after whatever it is that they're going through, and that whatever situation that they're in does not have to be permanent, and there can be redemption and another side to it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm married again.
Yeah.
Very happily married to a wonderful woman. Her name is May, and she has been so loving to me, and she has brought me much closer to Christ.
And then you just recently released your book, which we'll get to here at the end of the episode. I'll save the best for last. Or it's not necessarily the best for last. I think everything we're going to be talking about is great, because what I love
I don't even think about it. Because it's so surreal to me that I have a book out. It's just doesn't even process.
Yeah. And can I just say, Vic, is this where I can officially say I told you so? Because I said, Vic, someday, because I do think you're brilliant. I think you have a way of speaking to the everyman, which is what you do in your email, your weekly emails. I love them. I picked a few selections from some of your emails over the last several months that I want to kind of speak to for the guys so they get a sampling of it. But I've always told you, like, don't waste your life, Vic. You should be doing a podcast, or you should get on video. And you were always like, no way, man, I'm not going to do that stuff. But this is truly my moment to shine. This is why I wanted you on here, so I could say I told you so in front of all of the listeners of our podcast and viewers of our video channel, because I finally have you in front of a camera. And I love what you have to say. I love how you speak to men. It's raw, it's real. We might need to bleep out some of it, hopefully not in this interview. But
no, I don't think so.
But I think you just you've experienced enough of life, and now you're helping other men really to see that they can have redemption can be part of their story as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It only took 20 years for you to get me on camera. So
that's true. All right, let's do this. I want to go through a couple. I picked out a couple of your, it's a Sunday email that releases. Folks can go to redeemedsecondhalf.com to sign up for that. I'm a part of that. I read those all the time, even though Sundays are busy for me as a pastor. The first one I picked out is titled How to Carry the Past Without Being Ruled by It. I loved it. And here's what you said there. For a while, most men try to outrun their past, Rather than face it, we reinvent ourselves, we stay ridiculously busy, we frame regret as lessons learned and move right on along. We say, what's done is done, everyone makes mistakes. But eventually, whether we admit it or not, this will stop working. A man eventually learns that the issue is not whether the past will be carried, but how. So again, this is personal experience that you're speaking from. I love that about your all of your blog posts is you're just being honest. You're being vulnerable. You're telling your own story. And so this, like, you learned this firsthand.
Yeah, I did. And in multiple instances, we all have things going all the way back to our childhood or things that we did when we were in our youth that maybe, we blame ourselves for, we're not proud of. And there are a bunch of different ways to look at things. I mean, you can either, guys don't tend to do this so much, but there are some people that will like endlessly pick at the scab, and that way it'll never heal. But the other thing is you can just have that wound and let it heal without seeing a doctor or a surgeon, and then you end up with this horrible scar. So the thing is, you have to address it at some point. And as men, we're really good at just, like I said earlier, putting things in a box, closing the lid, and putting that box away. But it's still there. It's still taking up space in your mind and in your heart. And eventually, you need to open that box up, and you need to examine the thing, and you have to process it in some way. One of the ways that has helped me is like mistakes that I've made in the past. We tend to beat ourselves up, especially men. We really beat ourselves up for things we've done in the past and mistakes we've made. But, one of the things I've learned, a way to reframe it is, let's say something happened 10 years ago and you're thinking, man, that was a huge mistake. Why did I do that? It's like, well, you can't judge yourself from 10 years ago with the man you are today with another 10 years of life and experience. You didn't have all this knowledge 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, you made the best decision you could with the information and life experience you had at the time. So, okay, you made a mistake, but if you've learned all these life lessons since then, you can't judge your old self on who you are now. And that's one of the main things is understanding that hopefully you did the best you could at the time. And because I think guys and women do that all the time. They judge their old selves based on the knowledge they've gained in the meantime. And that's not going to do you any good.
I think some men, maybe some of the guys listening to this right now, if they're maybe newer to Christianity or just checking out a church or just stumbled across this podcast, they would say, wait a second, you can be vulnerable. Like a man's man can be vulnerable. A man's man can admit that they screwed up. I think that's like that's a mindset shift for some people to recognize that. And then when you pair that with what the Bible says about God giving people second chances, I think some of these ideas might be like really new for some of the men that probably read your emails every Sunday.
Well, sure. We're taught to be strong, and we can't show weakness. But, ironically, I believe that it takes strength to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to be outwardly vulnerable. That takes strength. That takes courage, because, we're exposing a wound. We're exposing a weakness that we have. Now, you have to be careful who you expose that to, right? But the thing is, like in my Substack, as you mentioned, I share things that I've been through because I want other men to know that they're not the only ones going through this kind of thing. And they're not the only ones feeling what they're feeling. That, many, many other men are going through the same things or feeling the same things. And it's okay to talk about it, especially with other men. I think it's very important to have a close group of men that you can be really open with, and that you can say whatever you need to say to them, and also that they will, hold your feet to the fire a little bit. Iron sharpens iron.
Well, and yeah, so I think this is one of the things I've appreciated about your story is I think you've always kind of been moving to, these last 18 years, however long I've known you, you've been moving toward I don't know if you'd call it self-improvement. Like you're always willing to push yourself to the next achievement. Now, maybe the motivation wasn't always, we'll get to that. It wasn't always necessarily in the right place. Some of it might have been to make more money or to whatever. I mean, you talk about this in your worship email that you sent out. It was so good. I can't wait to get to it. But again, for you, in your story, you had to get over this hump to not be this like independent, solo, self-made man, which you are. Like you built your first website from the ground up just by yourself. It's pretty crazy. And yet, so of all the men to be saying this now, that you need other guys, it's probably a little bit surprising if somebody really understood the story arc of your life. It's probably a little bit surprising that you're the one saying, carrying this message to other men. Right.
Well, it's interesting because I always did buy into that, self-made man thing, and and it's I built this and all that. But just the other night at dinner, I was saying grace, and I thank God for making me the man I am and for giving me the ability to accomplish things that I've accomplished, because not everyone can. Not everyone is wired to build a website from scratch to 15 million visits a month, and not everyone has the discipline and the motivation to work out for 20 years straight and stay fit. And I always like, oh well, that's me, that's not me. I was like, well, God gave those attributes to me that allow me to do that, so I'm very, very grateful for that.
All right, let's go to this next title. It's titled "Nothing Will Work for You Until This Does." I love your titles, by the way. That's one of the reasons I keep clicking on Sunday morning, even though I'm getting ready to go preach. I'm like, I got to read Vic's email today, and here's what you say there: if you don't believe you can change, if you don't believe that there's something out there that can help you change, everything else is a complete and utter waste of time. You can read books, you can watch videos, but it's all just head knowledge, and you'll never really believe it. Everything flows from this. So this, at first, I mean, you got to really read the full article. People can go to your website to do that, your Substack to do that. But at first, it sounds like maybe a little bit of a Tony Robbins thing, but it's deeper than that, right? Because you say later it's the same principle with God. If you refuse the possibility that he's real and worth trusting, you'll dismiss every piece of evidence that points in his direction. That's what I love about kind of this new little thing, this venture that you've started, that you're talking to the everyman in a way that's relatable to them, and then you're just peppering in, like not in an obnoxious way, you're peppering in faith, which to me I love. That's why I want some of our men to be able to see this, maybe share it with other men in their life, because you're not gonna feel like you're hearing a preacher, for 30 minutes straight, but you recognize that faith in Jesus is at the bottom of all of this for every man, certainly in your own story.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, my Substack is not a Christian Substack, and much like myself, I don't walk around quoting Bible verses and talking about Jesus all day long, but my faith informs who I am, and my faith informs my writing. And it is true that, for years, I mean, I'd read the books, I'd, watched YouTube videos, I've done all this stuff, but I didn't really believe that anything would be able to fix me. I had horrible self-confidence issues, and I thought, after my divorce, I thought, oh, no woman will ever want me. Why would a woman want me, and all this stuff? And I didn't think anything would help me. And, I did some work with some folks, and this guy asked me a very pointed question, and he was trying to crack that nut. That was the first thing that had to be solved for me. And he said, "So you don't think anything will ever work for you? Anything will ever help?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Wow, so on this planet of 6 billion people, you have tried every single modality known to man, and you've come to the conclusion that nothing will ever work for you." I'm like, "Well, no, I haven't tried everything." And he's like, "Really? That's really interesting. So even though you haven't tried everything, you're convinced nothing will ever work." And I said, well, yeah, I guess. And he said, so actually, the truth is that nothing you've ever tried up until now has helped you, right? And I was like, well, yeah. And it was like the light bulb went off. And it's like, and we tend to do that, we with all kinds of stuff, and we just make these decisions even though we haven't explored every single option there is. And that was the first step that allowed me on my journey to start fixing myself and improving myself and basically accepting who I am and thinking that I'm okay and liking myself.
Well, and then how it relates to me, how it relates to faith, tell me if I've got this right, Vic, is I think some men could feel the same way in the kind of the faith section of their experience. Mm-hmm. You're talking about just in general, but even just in the faith section, you have a bad experience as a kid with church, you have a bad experience. So now what you're doing is you're labeling all of the Jesus-centered stuff as that is like anathema, like that didn't work for me.
Right.
But so even for some of our listeners, just to say, look, God is real and worth trusting. And probably some of your readers are like, no, he's not. No, or maybe they would say he might be real, but he's not worth trusting because I remember this guy, or I watched this video, or I had this experience. So I think even with faith, some people need to realize, give church another chance, give Jesus another chance. I think this is, in a certain sense, this is kind of your experience as well. I think you had a bad taste in your mouth with some of the Christians you ran into, and then you meet your now wife, who I think she was a big part of giving you a new view on who Jesus is and his grace.
Yeah, she told me that God had been chasing me for a long time. And you remember back in the day when we go out for coffee and I was always asking questions, like the really hard questions, and even a couple of years ago here in Nashville, I went out and had coffee with a pastor, and I asked him a question, and very knowledgeable, very experienced, and he's like, wow, I'd never thought about that before. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. I don't really have an answer for you. But you know what? I finally got to the point, to your point, where I just like, there's some things I'm just never going to understand. We're not meant to understand. And I just have to let those go. And yes, take that leap of faith. Now, is it a ignorant faith? No, it's an educated leap of faith. But I've just let go of a lot of those questions. I'm like, God is so far above and beyond me that, it's a poor analogy, but then the analogy is like being a parent of like a 3-year-old, right? Your 3-year-old wants to eat candy for dinner. And you're like, no, you can't eat candy. And 3-year-old doesn't understand why he can't have candy for dinner, but you know why, and it's good for them, right? So, yeah, and the other thing is, I had a horrible experience as a child related to the church, and that put me off for 2 decades. And but you're right. It's like we take one isolated experience and then we paint the entire church or the entire, world of Christianity. We look through that lens, and it's like, well, if that one person did that one thing, then everybody must be horrible.
All right, one more article. This one came out on Easter. This might have been my favorite. It's titled, "What Do You Worship?" And here's what you say there. Worship is about whatever you give final authority over your life. Whatever tells you what you're worth, whatever you sacrifice for without being asked, or fear losing more than anything else. Every man worships, you said. It's not just the the guys that go to church every week or cry during worship songs. Every man worships either his bank account, his title, the approval of others, his body in the mirror, the grudge he won't put down. Those are altars. He built them whether he meant to or not. I just thought this was so insightful. And I want you to speak to this for a little bit, maybe even just in your own story, because you've worshiped other things, even though maybe you wouldn't even early in your life, you wouldn't have called yourself a religious person. But this is your own story, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, my entire life up until recently, and maybe because I achieved it. I worshiped money and success. That was like, and I tell people, some people have a dream about building a company that does this or that or the other thing. I just wanted to have money. I didn't care how I got there. I just, it's like I would jump from thing to thing to thing, try this, try that, fail, okay, get up, try the next thing. And that was my entire goal. Now, so I worship that. And I do suffer from a bit of excess perfectionism. So that also informs who I am and what I do and how I look at things. So, I've worshipped my body in the mirror. I've worshipped money, because, and the definition comes from, what would happen to me if I lost either one of those? I'd be devastated. And now I am trying to focus more on Christ. But that's the thing. It's like you have conversations with guys and listen to what people tend to talk about all the time. Whatever you're talking about the most, that's what has all your attention. And so now the group of guys that I hang out with, they're all, for the most part, Christian men. And the conversations are just so very different, from success and money and having, a super hot girlfriend on your arm and all that kind of stuff, So there's a lot of worshiping that goes on, but guys don't put that label on it because it sounds religious, Now,
you said that you recognized one of your idols was worship, that you worshiped money, and you were actually good at making money, it turns out. So right. You were very successful in the world's eyes. But would you say that you don't have to be wealthy to worship money?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to be wealthy. I mean, it's the old thing about the broke person saying, "Oh, if only I had $1 million, then I'd be happy." And,
yep.
You know what I mean? And you can never make somebody truly understand this. But it's like if you're unhappy when you're broke, if you're an unhappy person, you will be an unhappy rich person. Because that comes from inside. It's not the money that makes you happy. Now, does money make things easier? Does it bring you more freedom? Yes, but it won't make you happy. You can still be miserable as all get out and have a ton of money. I mean, that's what happened to me. I mean, I had a lot of money and I was still miserable and angry all the time. It didn't fix that. And the things you buy with money, they'll make you happy for 5 minutes, but then it's like, oh, okay, I've got the thing and then that fades and you're looking for the next thing. So yeah, you can be broken and worship money.
Yeah. I think in your own story, money was an idol for you long before you were wealthy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I grew up like lower middle class. My parents instilled a really good work ethic in me by example. They had menial jobs. But I always wanted to, and we never wanted for anything, went on vacation once a year and always had food in the house and all that. But, and I don't know where it came from, but, I always wanted, a higher level lifestyle. But yeah, I absolutely worshiped that. I chased it for 2 decades. I chased it.
All right, Vic, let's talk about your book. So you're finally an author. Can't believe it. The book is called The Last 10 Pounds. Okay, so yes. Talk about kind of the premise of the book. Yeah, the premise of the book. And this is really interesting that you were collecting data for 15 years, and yeah. This is what you put into this book. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I'm very much into data. Like when I ran my websites, I was always, my face was always in the spreadsheet and analytics and analyzing traffic and all that stuff. And so I just started, and again, because of, worshiping the body in the mirror, I started tracking my food 15 years ago. And then, also connected to that, vanity, taking mirror selfies over the years, And so with the advent of AI now, you're able to collate all this data And so I dropped all my logs into Claude, and I'm like, analyze my food and this and that. And it said, oh, you've got 34,000 food log entries. And I was like, what? 34,000? Yeah, it was insane. So, and then I went through my phone and I had like 10 years of selfies. And then I had an idea. I'm like, okay, I would like to, and again, I could not have done this without AI. I said, look at the dates on all these selfies. And then I want to know what I was eating in the 6 weeks leading up to each selfie. And then a pattern started to emerge. And also, this was based on an ebook that I wrote 23 years ago called The Last 10 Pounds. It was a 9-week experiment where I went from 15 to 9% body fat, and I documented everything even back then. But now I came up with the idea of like, well, okay, that's a 9-week experiment. Let me talk about what it takes to maintain that over decades. And the book it's kind of a fitness memoir, but it also has very useful information to help somebody get fit and get in shape. But, and I put in the good, the bad, and the ugly in there. I talk about my drinking and how that affected, the mirror selfie and how soft I looked when I drank and what happened when I stopped tracking food and all that. So it's a bit of a fitness memoir, and it covers my life over the past 15 years and 11 adult surgeries and 4 moves in 4 years and a divorce, and how I managed to stay fit throughout all that and how it impacted my fitness.
Speaking to the guy out there who's in his 40s, 50s, 60s, and maybe is just feeling like, I need redemption. Let's just, what's your main message for that kind of guy?
I think the point of my Substack is to prove that you can rebuild from wherever you are, and that the second half of your life can be as good or better than your first half, and that it's possible. I know that when you are in the valley and things are going wrong and everything looks bleak, you can't see the other side of it. So I am trying, and my life isn't perfect. I haven't figured everything out, but I am trying to write from the other side to show that if you're in the thick of it right now, there is an exit. There is another side to it. You can come out of this. I think I said somewhere, it feels like you're in a dark cave. But if you keep walking deeper into the cave, eventually you'll see a light at the end, and you can exit that cave and come out the other side.
Well, Vic, you've done that in your life, and I'm proud of you for putting it out there, putting yourself out there to help other men.
Thanks.
We'll put links to the website, to the Substack, to the book down below. I encourage other guys to check it out and share it with your friends. Maybe, especially to the Christian men listening to this, I'd encourage you to share. To me, it's a great bridge to the guy who doesn't maybe want to explore the faith side of things. But I think, Vic, as I said before, I think you do a good job of mixing that stuff in too, because that Jesus, like what we like to say at Pursue God, Jesus is the answer to all of it. So when people are introduced to Jesus, that's when real life change happens. And so Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your story, and keep up the good work, brother.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend. Find more resources to talk about these topics with your small group, family, or mentor on PursueGOD.org.